Ladies and gentlemen, I am super stoked about this episode. This is the Drilled with Dr. Brady podcast. In case you were wondering if you clicked on something different on your podcast app. But we are joined today by a gentleman that I met on the Clubhouse app. I just did a whole podcast episode about the Clubhouse app and how I was super excited about it. And one of the guys I met on Clubhouse, had a great conversation with, is Phil Demers, who is a Canadian who is on a crusade to save a walrus named Smooshy. And he has a very interesting documentary called The Walrus and the Whistleblower. He is the main focus of that documentary. And he has crusaded. He was a former employee of Marineland, which is like the SeaWorld of Canada, and had a lot of issues with the way Marineland was running things, and decided he could no longer work there, and he went on a crusade against Marineland. This is a true David and Goliath story, which is just an amazing story to unpack and unravel. Philip, welcome to the Drill with Dr. Brady podcast. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure meeting you on Clubhouse, and it was cool to turn it over to this.
You know, the first thing. So, do you know Sean Kathleen from Passenger Shaming?
Yeah, I do know. Yeah, I met her through Twitter.
So that's who kind of introduced us.
Right, and then that went over to Instagram, and then we sort of just became buds, through a couple of Instagram lives. And she was, of course, a great supporter, and we just went from there. Now we formed what I would absolutely quantify as a total friendship.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's been on our podcast before as well, and has an amazing Instagram. For those who don't know, Passenger Shaming is just the most obscene and absurd things that you can see on airplanes. If you ever record something on an airplane that you think is worthy, she will likely post it for you. And if you see people acting out on airplanes or in airports, she's great. So she was in a Clubhouse room, and there wasn't very many people in the room, and you happened to be in that room. And then she told me a little bit about you really quick, and I immediately just started talking about teeth, because that's what I do. I was like, well, Mike, and here's the thing, you opened my eyes. Like, immediately I was fascinated with what you were saying to me, because I said, hey, I volunteered, I've called up and bothered the Oregon Zoo, I don't know, a dozen times, because I wanted to volunteer to do dental work on animals, right? So from time to time, dental work is needed on animals, and they have teeth just like humans, and at least some of them do. And you opened my eyes, man. You were like, they probably don't want you to be there because you're not part of the system. And I was like, so naive. And you're like, explaining this to me like, there's a system, there's an industry, and you're not part of it. And if you're outside, they don't want you inside, and you're a liability. And I was like, I'm just a stupid dentist trying to do like a root canal on a river otter or something like that. You know, I just think that's kind of cool. And you opened my eyes to that, man. So that like immediately was like, dude, I'm fascinated with this guy, man. You know some stuff. So let's start by talking about your time at Marineland. How long were you there? What was your duty? In what capacity did you work at Marineland?
I started in 2000. The capacity was my title was a marine mammal trainer's assistant, and so that's basically how you get into the industry. You wash buckets, you prepare diets. It did not take very long before the in-house training turned me from trainer's assistant to trainer. And then, of course, over time, because my tenure was between 2000 and 2012, I eventually became more of a management position. So, supervising the stadium, the overall program and whatnot. And then, down to training the trainers. So I was, by the end there, I was training the trainers, training the animals, and overseeing basically a large chunk of the marine mammal collection.
And your training prior to your employment, did you? Are you like a high school graduate? Is that all you got to be, or what's the requirements to kind of? Because I see pictures of you and videos of you swimming with orcas, and getting propelled into the air. And I'm just like, so is there any training? Like, did you just, like, is it on the job type of training?
Right. All of the training was done in-house. In fact, I wasn't going to apply for the job if not for my actual father calling Marineland and asking, what is it required to get this job? Because back then, when you were looking for a job, you looked up what was called want ads in the newspapers. Scrolled to the back of the newspapers and you took a look at what job opportunities were out there locally. And for me, the marine mammal trainer's assistant job come up. I immediately assumed you would need some level of education, be it marine biology or something
like that. I would assume
what
the same
attracted
thing.
Marineland. What? Sorry.
I said I would assume the same thing. Yeah.
Right. And right. So a couple of things I'll mention, because the other thing was, I remember in my interview they asked me what I believe the starting wage to be, and that was something that I've assumed to be a little higher than what it was. But we'll get to that. But my father had asked what kind of education they needed, and what they had said to me was that, or to him, was that the turnover rate was pretty crazy, and that there was a lot of there's a lot of coming and going in the department, and that I should apply regardless of education, and they were looking for a wide array of talents. Well, what Marineland claimed they liked about my resume was I was a recent graduate from what was called audio engineering and multimedia post-production, which really at the time was a fancy way of saying plays with audio on internet, which would eventually become a free download 6 months to my graduation date, but that's okay. Who would have known that in 2000? But nonetheless, they appreciated that I had that. They liked that I was scuba certified, and I could see why they would. I mean, that certainly is invaluable. But beyond that, in my interview, they asked me if I had any experience. I told them I owned an iguana. Next thing I know, I was being sized for boots, and I got the job. And I do remember my second point being when they asked me, what do you believe your starting wage would be? And I said, well, and this is back in 2000, I thought, well, it seems like quite a specialized job. I mean, I would assume that it would have been some mid-range paying. I mean, I even half glorified that it would be a good paying job. So I put down like $20 an hour.
Yeah.
And, they came back to me and said, well, would it discourage you terribly to find out that the job pays $7 an hour? And at the time, minimum wage was $6.85. So I was swimming with and jumping off orca whales over an 8-hour period for the equivalent of before taxes of about $56 a day.
That blows my mind, dude. That blows my mind.
You can see why scientists and PhD holders wouldn't necessarily gravitate towards working with marine mammals suddenly.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. That's like I just found out recently how much like NFL cheerleaders get screwed over on their, like, you think these people who are out on the field and like dancing for millions of people, but lots of those people get paid like a minimum wage type of thing. It's always shocking to me when it's like, but there's got to be an allure to like swimming and being around these amazing animals, let alone swimming with them. That's got to be like, it beats Taco Bell,
I was often reminded that that if I didn't like the job, I could always leave because there was a long lineup of people willing to do it. So it's romantic in its concept. Mm-hmm. It's romantic when you're young, but once you've been there for a certain period of time and the allure goes away and sort of the illusion of what that was supposed to be goes away, you can't unsee and you can't help yourself but you can't help yourself but realize that this is an industry that's based on misinformation and keeping people like me, for instance, employed, and people who want the job for the allure of swimming with orcas versus the conservation and education aspect and whatnot.
I remember one of the first times I went to SeaWorld. I was really young, and I remember that being one of the jobs, the earliest memory of me saying, I want to do that. Like, that seems amazing. Like, it's just exactly how you're saying it. I'm young, it's romantic. I see these trainers on the backs, being on, they put like your feet on their nose, and then they just kind of propel you through the water. I just thought, like, that's got to feel like flying. I mean, that's got to be like as close as you can get. And then, of course, I never assumed that they were in any danger and that the animals were anything but happy and thrilled to be there and participating as well. But that's one of the first jobs that I was like, I remember being young and being like, I would love to be that and do that. For a time, did you feel like, I'm pretty lucky?
Absolutely, dude. I sort of took the job. It wasn't my aspiration. It wasn't something I planned to do. I didn't go to school for it. It wasn't even remotely on my radar.
Yeah.
But once I got there, it felt like home. I love animals. I mean, that I just do. I love people. I'm, for the most part, A-type, and give me a stage and a microphone, and we'll have some fun. And and it's just the way it is. And I got to work with some dynamic people, some young people, and it was just everything about it, including the willful ignorance, especially that of my youth, was perfect for a period. Even to the proximity of where I work, the fact that I didn't, but I could walk to work. It was a very, 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 in all aspects of my life, it was quite accommodating, except for on my conscience over time.
Yeah. So let me ask you about that. So, well, first of all, you, what's so amazing about your documentary, what kind of strikes me was that you call yourself the mother of one of these walruses. That this walrus, through a process, a very natural process that happens in nature called imprinting, this walrus, this baby walrus named Smooshy, imprinted on you, and you became Smooshy's mother. Well, can you talk about that process, how Smooshy came into your life, how Smooshy came into Marineland, and then the process of becoming Smooshy's mother?
So there were rumblings that we would be acquiring a walrus. And this was, now granted, this was years before we actually got Smooshy, but that began a sort of floodgate opening of us acquiring walruses, wild-caught, young, arguably what you would call baby walruses, under the age of 2. In some cases, under the age of 1. As trainers, we were sort of baffled because we had no experience in handling walruses. We knew nothing of them. So the first one came in and she was a bit of an experiment. The owner really immediately saw the dollar signs and how cute this animal was, and immediately started getting more. Well, the circumstance of capturing animals from the wild and bringing them in, and that they don't all survive. Some not long at all, especially when you separate them from their mothers and cause emotional trauma to them at such a young age. They, so as we were receiving walruses, some would die, and they would just as well be replaced. So we would have one die. We would know that there would be one coming again, probably in the coming weeks, and it was consistent. Otherwise at Marineland, you didn't quite know when animals were coming unless you were one of the few people that would have known the day of, and then that evening you would acquire the animal via transport, whatever, go pick them up at the airport, and then the next morning, unbeknownst to trainers, there's more animals. We would sort of, you get the sense, okay, another walrus has died, more would be coming.
They don't prep you for that? They don't say weeks in advance. It's like you just show up to work and like, hey, we got more animals to take care of. Here you go.
This happened with dolphins. This happened with beluga whales. This happened. I was part of the team that went to get beluga whales one evening, and we didn't know with absolute certainty. And that was me with the owner, physically traveling in the vehicle with. And I don't know if it was if they were just alluding or trying to suggest that they weren't certain, but we went to the airport uncertain of whether for sure we were getting these belugas. So we sat at the airport and twirled our thumbs for hours, and then suddenly a plane appears. So much so that the woman, this is crazy, but the woman at the airport, when we were all sitting there lounged for hours, and she was an administrative person of sorts. They kept looking for planes on the radar themselves to confirm whether this was happening. It seemed the level of secrecy was to the point where I don't even know that the airport knew with absolute certainty, and I don't know if that's logistically possible, but with my eyes and my experience and having been there, this is what it was. So, quite literally, everything was done very, very, very secretly. You were either tapped on the shoulder and you were part of the team, or you had a sense of something happening, and the next day you showed up and your confirmation was either right or wrong. In the case of Smooshy, she, a walrus had died, a young walrus only a couple weeks earlier. So we anticipated one would come. In fact, two babies came. So the process when you receive animals, the first thing you do is you want to assess their health. So what we do is we draw some blood. Well, the process of drawing blood to an animal that is quote unquote green, so untrained or unfamiliar with the process, you can train animals to tolerate pain, and you can train them to otherwise be accepting of husbandry and medical treatment. But when they're wild, forget about it. It's a wrestling match, whether you like it or not. So here we were, and we were having a wrestling match with one of the walruses trying to get blood, and Smooshy was very frantic and panicking, and at 200 pounds and 18 months of age, she was very disruptive. So she was climbing all over us, and I sought to take her away from the scene, and I put my hands in front of her face, and she took this big breath, and she looked at me with the big eyes, and that was the moment where scientists would say that I imprinted on her. And this is a natural occurring process in the wild, and the reason being is that with animals that live in amongst thousands of their own, so herds, mothers and calves need to be able to identify each other. So imagine 30,000 or 10,000 walruses on a beach, and a baby and a calf and a mother must be able to identify each other. So that's the process that happens. So the scientists attribute the fact that Smooshy was in a heightened state of emotion at 18 years of age, and her brain circuitry opened, and for some reason I tattooed on her brain, and in that moment I became her mother.
And she would treat you like that. She followed you everywhere. When you were there, she would come right to you and basically, I mean, for all intents and purposes, treated you like a normal walrus would treat their mother.
She was super protective.
So she became protective of you.
Protective of me. She was frantic to the point of she was crazy in my absence. So in every waking moment, all she ever wanted to be was with me. So you can imagine she was always vocalizing, and it actually became a problem when our separation caused some health issues. So
I imagine. Yeah,
there's no question that the bond that we had was not that of anything other than what can be described as paternal and maternal, in fact, that of a mother.
So then it became, I imagine that became like obvious to all your coworkers and your supervisors and your superiors, and you became involved in what would be like, I guess, like Smooshy was then used for, I mean, all the animals are used for entertainment, right? They're all used for entertainment to entertain people. And you were involved in that show. Is that how I would phrase it? Right? Like there would be a show with Smooshy would come out and do something or be.
I mean, Smooshy as a whole was treated as best we can for her purpose, which was that of a working animal. So she would participate in the show like any other walruses were intended to. But with Smooshy, it was a challenge because she didn't want to do anything. She just wanted to follow me or look for me. It was so something we had to work on a lot. She was very bored with training. Training was a boring thing. She didn't like being with other trainers. But in that realm, she was a performing animal that at the end of the show or in the middle of it, she'd come out and do these little tricks and entertain the crowd and then back into the back into the warehouse.
All right. So before I get into some more philosophical type of things with you, because there's a lot of really interesting aspects of your entire journey that I'm super fascinated with, just spell out for everybody your exit from, like, how did you evolve from this elated, romantic, amazing job to, I got to get out of here. This is terrible. I need to do something. How did that evolve?
Well, the whole notion of this being terrible and my having to do something is something that all the trainers to a certain extent felt in the latter portions of my tenure, of my decision prior to leaving, because the conditions of the park really were deteriorating, and the owner, albeit he's now passed away, he was he was an elder man and stuck in his ways. He was not making the investment necessary. He was fine to bring in more animals, but he was barely even maintaining the infrastructures whatsoever. So it wasn't just me. So it did take some time, but basically what happened was my mental health was such that I couldn't. There was no way I was going to open the season again. So in the winter, Marineland is closed, and then in summer it opens. So we had a breakdown in the water disinfection unit in the end of the operating season of the summer, and then over the course of the winter, the owner refused to address the issue. So rather than fix the ozone generator, which is just a disinfectant that works in conjunction with chlorine, so that you can actually mitigate the chlorine use, because chlorine, obviously, if you've ever swam in a pool. So the chlorine. So what happened was the owner would just dump more and more and more and more chlorine. So now we were fast approaching May, which is the month we're supposed to open. My walrus is not immune. Animals have begun to die. It gets pretty gruesome. And now we're preparing to open the park. And I can't do that. In what world can I mean, I can go so long with saying, okay, behind these closed doors for the next very short period of time, the animals are going to experience a larger than normal degree of suffering on account of the fact that the infrastructure is broken. Okay, I can stomach that for so long because that's the situation we're in. You're not going to do that for 6 months to save money, and then at the very, very end, actually assume that in some way, shape, or form, I'm going to participate in defending that. And by me putting my face and putting myself on that show and in that product and pretending like that everything's okay, I couldn't stomach that. There was a level of understanding that the industry itself causes X and X amount of death. You would assume that to a certain extent. I mean, not the stats that would eventually come out, but you bring in whales from the wild and they live for so long and then they die. That happens. Mm-hmm. But this degree of suffering was inexcusable. And now you're going to open the park, so it wasn't going to work. So I became obviously noted as a person of a problem employee over time, as you can imagine. And just prior to when the park was supposed to open, I quit. I said, I'm not doing this. And they begged me to stay, and I said, that's not happening. Now, I wouldn't have left without the agreement and their understanding that I had to stay in Smooshy's life on account of the fact that our separation has caused some issues health-wise in the past. They understood and they agreed. And so those are the circumstances where I said, okay, then I'm going to leave. It should be noted that Marineland immediately and frantically started dumping the water after they knew, okay, Phil's, they knew I'd reached my limits.
Yeah.
They also, I came to learn, had no interest in honoring their part of the agreement, which was to allow for me to continue to see Smooshy, because 1 month later, after longer than I'd ever been separated from her, I returned and they wouldn't let me in the park. And it took it took a stroke of luck that the owner's son sort of escorted me in. And then when I saw the veterinarians, they were sort of, they weren't looking forward to my reaction. And I went back and when I saw Smooshy in the condition she was in, I realized there and then that Marineland's going to kill this animal. And that's when I decided to speak out. The media had been calling, because it should be noted that years prior, we had gone, I guess, what you would call viral, the equivalent of what 2008 version of viral is. But Smooshy and I's strange relationship did become a fluff story and was celebrated all over in multiple headlines, international. I was on the cover of CNN for a bit. We were discussed on Jimmy Kimmel did a piece on his monologue and whatnot. So we had had some attention. So the media was calling me when I quit, but I was reluctant to talk. And it wasn't until I saw Smooshy in her condition that I resolved, okay, I got to do something.
Yeah. So that leads me into, it's a classic David and Goliath story. And I relate to that on a very personal level, because there are things within my profession that I feel need to be brought to light that aren't, and that dentists collectively just kind of like do their thing and move on, and prices go up and more people are without dental insurance and dental providers and things like that. So government has to step in, and government has to create these clinics that run poorly and take, awful care of the poorest among us. And to some extent, I I mean, I admire what you do, even though it's a completely different like realm of different profession, different industry. But I would think the majority of people would be like, I'm not going to fight Marineland. I'm not going to go after this beast. I'm just little old me, and they got this walrus. So you need help from people. You need to be able to speak out. And then you got hooked up with Joe Rogan, which in your documentary and definitely on your last episode with the last time you were on, you've been on 5 times on Rogan's podcast. That's amazing. And you fully attribute some of the progress that's been made to his podcast and just the exposure that's opened up for you. Specifically the passing of, I think is it S-203? Is this the bill in Canada that banned the captivity of porpoises, dolphins, orcas? Am I getting that right?
You nailed it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then you got hooked up with this filmmaker who makes this documentary about your experience. And I'm sure that pissed off Marineland. They're not very happy about that. But why, like, what I really want to know from you is like, what drove you? Like, why is it, or what is it about a human being in general? Maybe not you, just in general. Why do you think so many would give up and you didn't? You stuck with it, and doors opened for you. And maybe there's some lucky breaks in there. Maybe it's your tenacity of just unrelenting, savagery going after this goal of yours. But I'm the same way, where I get it in my head, I think, and I can't quit certain things that I do. I can't quit. And I think that's kind of how you, but speak to that. What makes everyone quit where you don't?
And this is the thing that I have to say that I wouldn't be able to relate to, because I don't understand the whole premise of quit. Like, I'm not attributing this to my everyday. This isn't me on every aspect of life saying, never quit everything. I'm saying for this very specific targeted thing that I'm doing, there's not been an iota of doubt. There's not been an iota of question. There's been lots of fear. There's been lots of insecurities. I mean, I've been very blessed in that I've been hanging on by the skin of my teeth a number of times. Like, I have been on my heels. There have been times when I've been indebted to the tune of life-changing money, and then there's other times when just processes in the lawsuit start to where you start to lose the light and seeing the end of the tunnel. I mean, Marineland sued me in 2013 for $1.5 million for plotting to steal Smooshie. Now, they did so, it's called a SLAP suit, and the acronym is a strategic lawsuit against public participation. They didn't want me to keep speaking of Marineland's practices for the very reason that they don't want legislation or any sort of regulations around them, right? The industry wants to be unencumbered. They want to be able to be able to buy animals and sell them freely. So I think that what became of my resolve is, you've got a walrus that I now am feeling very powerful. Now, in the same way that she sees me as her mother, I have to say that there are levels of which that I feel for her, like I'm assuming the power of that of a parent and their daughter. I don't have a daughter. I just know that in this hostage-like situation, there is absolutely no negotiating with me. So when I say that I feel like a walrus mom, and people, a lot of people want to attribute, maybe you call me crazy and call me whatever you want, and I'm comfortable with all of those, but I've seen the power of you can see it with your own eyes, and you hear these stories of mothers lifting cars over that are otherwise have their children pinned. You hear of these great lengths of courage that are exercised. Well, I feel the same way. I feel almost like there's just nothing that's going to stop me. And the other thing that should be noted, I've known Marineland intimately. That was not just my home. Like, I mean, this is I can feel Marineland, and I know their weaknesses, and I know their ways, and I know what they do. So in a lot of ways, there's an instinct to what it is that I've been doing, because I've needed them to make a lot of mistakes on the way, and I have to say that many of those were served up to them on silver platters.
Yeah, you've accomplished a lot. That bill getting passed was insane, and some of the things that I've been concerned about in my own profession of dentistry. I've started the process of like talking to representatives, and I've got a little glimpse of like government bureaucracy and like, hey, here's a problem. Let's just quickly solve it. But that's not how it works. It's not a quickly solve it. That bill getting passed, you mentioned in the documentary, there was so much delay, so many tactics to just punt that ball down the road, kick that can, and delay it, and that's taxing on you mentally for sure, because it's just like this is never going to. They can just do these tactics forever. And so I've been disheartened for sure. Talking to government officials actually disheartens me. Like it like makes me feel like, oh, nothing is ever going to happen because, this isn't a voting issue for people. Dentistry is kind of like, medicine's, redheaded stepchild. It's not like a real thing. Like who cares about, no one's constituency cares about dental work. So it's not like a big important thing for the politicians and the legislators who make the laws. How frustrating was it for you because you're also like an outsider who gets shoved into like, now we're passing a bill and you see that process. How crazy frustrating is that for you?
So frustrating, especially when you know that there are sponsors in-house in the Senate suddenly lying on behalf of Marineland, manipulating democracy and literally trying to thwart democracy, because this is a scientifically sound, publicly supported bill, and in every which way there was a senator, and again, it's exemplified in the film, but he was just, he just had enough power that he almost killed the bill, and to the point where I have to say that bill was saved many times, and at times that it was otherwise going to be very secretly killed, and it wasn't. If not for, again, you had mentioned earlier that I've attributed some of my successes to Joe. I attribute all of it to him.
Wow.
Because in every which way that Joe Rogan has helped me, in many of the ways that a lot of calls to action to get the public to I mean, at one point we crashed the Senate server in Canada because they tried to kill the bill very quietly, and I had a bunch of activists and people call and email, and the servers broke, and that got the attention of the senators who otherwise kept this bill from dying. So Joe has helped me in ways, and is the reason that much of this legislation is passing, and is now an example for all of the world, and many of other countries are now following suit to S203. But the process, yeah, it's a bewildering experience to try to, especially as a person who would otherwise have faith in the system, because you're ignorant to it, you pay into it, and you assume the people playing with it know what they're doing, but it's like anything else. The more you know about something, you realize the less you did. But having said that, it's not just the patience that I've had to exercise in the passing of the bill, which was, again, in every which way manipulated. And it has now actually inspired some change in the Senate. They're actually going to clamp down on and are enacting new laws to keep from things that had happened in Bill S203 from ever happening again, because they should and will be deemed moving forward as illegal. But I also have a litigation that's looming. I'm also 8 years into being sued for millions of dollars. So it's not just a little bit of waiting. It's a lot of frustration from waiting, and it's a lot of frustration of dealing with corruption and lies, because you can see just how far money goes in protecting lives, and it goes really far. I shouldn't be here talking to you right now in any other circumstance other than the exact ones that have allowed me somehow to survive this against all odds. I would not be here speaking to you.
Yeah. So talking about, okay, so orcas, I want to go back to our conversation on Clubhouse, because you mentioned something super interesting, and I think this is a point that probably isn't brought up a lot, but I think it's a very interesting way of looking at how animals are treated. You told me you said you should see some pictures of this orca named Kiska. And this orca named Kiska, and I immediately on Clubhouse, you can kind of scroll out or like not leave the room, but pull up another tab, basically another browser, and I started Googling Kiska, and you said zoom in on her teeth. So I Google imaged Kiska the orca, and I Google imaged her teeth, and her teeth had been whittled down to little nubs, like flush with the gum line. There were no actual teeth how you would recognize teeth. They're just like almost like they were filed down or broken, which is exactly what happened. Kiska was, I think, if I remember right, Kiska was gnawing on little bars or gates or something like that, right? And just acting out and hurting herself. And you have these teeth that, can't. Anyways, you could see from a dentist perspective, you could see the pulp chamber of the tooth, which was exposed. At some point, the nerve that's inside that tooth will die. But until that point happens, it's excruciatingly painful. Even for a large mammal, it would be unthinkable. And so I recalled back to another podcast I did with a child protective services officer. So a person who's in charge of, it was a patient of mine who just had some really interesting stories. And one of the things that she mentioned to me is we always look at the dentist. We always go to the dentist. We get dental records of the kid. If we suspect that there's abuse or physical harm being done to a child, we go to where they can't hide, which is the dentist. They can't hide the teeth. They can put shirts over the bruises. They can put, clothing over bruises and marks like that, but they can't hide the teeth. So we go to the dentist and we get the records, we get the x-rays, we get the evaluation, we get the dentist opinion, what's going on. And I've had to call CPS 2 times in my career, 11-year career, because of things that I've seen, which are similar to what I saw when you told me to look at Kiska's teeth. If I saw if Kiska was a human being in my office, in my dental chair with teeth that look like that, I'm calling CPS. I'm saying that you're not. This is not someone who's being. This is not an animal that's being taken care of. This is an animal that's being abused. This animal is in pain. This animal is suffering clearly. And in the CPS world, the dentist's opinion goes super far. And in the documentary, the Walrus and the Whistleblower, Kiska is featured briefly, but the teeth issue is not spoken of. But from a dental perspective, I just thought it was super fascinating because I look at that and take one look, and I'm like, abuse, 100%. Abuse. The average person may not see that, but I see it immediately,
In the passing of the legislation, we had many scientists actually speak to it, veterinarians. They offered reports. Now, granted, Marineland kicks out veterinarians or renowned scientists, so it's often difficult to get a thorough report, but we did manage to get some people in there. And of course, the dental records are. It shows the extent of which the animal's environment is also static, in that she's always so bored that over her history and it's consistent in most orcas in captivity that they deal with that. And the issue of pain, it should be noted that Kiska is on a lot of drugs always. The trainers do flush the teeth. That's a habitual thing that they do, I believe, daily at this point.
Flush with what?
But her life is with a betadine solution.
Okay.
They just
disinfectant?
get an empty vial with like a syringe, and I can't remember exactly what the stuff's called. But it's just we dilute it a little bit, and then we just give it a flush. And we were doing it then every morning. But it should be noted that she is on a lot of
drugs. Yeah. Well, I would suspect anyone with teeth that are ground down where the nerves are exposed and you can see the pulp chamber of the teeth. Any mammal in that scenario is going to be hurting, suffering for sure. Going to need some drugs. Absolutely. Okay. So the other thing is that, I wanted to ask you, is there a form of captivity? Because I look at it as, man, I was enamored with SeaWorld. I was as a child, as you go see this stuff and you're like, these are animals I'll never see in the wild. There is an education aspect to it for sure. I mean, it's definitely more entertainment and money driven, but there's that aspect. Is there a form of captivity that could work, or is it just, no, there's nothing. These animals they gotta roam?
I believe by virtue of our having had captivity, that it is already here. I think we owe it to the animals to offer them the greatest semblance of a free and natural life as possible. They're sort of stuck with captivity. So do I believe there's a way? Yes, I believe for those animals, the ideal situation is a sanctuary-like environment. And the good news is there is something in the works. I encourage people to check out the Whale Sanctuary project. So on the east coast of Canada, they're building along the coast, they're building a penned-off sanctuary where, for instance, Marineland's belugas will be able to live a semblance of a normal life. Now, they'll still be under human care, but they'll have area spaces that eclipse that of Marineland's absurdly small pools. They'll be in natural water, so no more chemicals. They'll feel the natural rhythms of the sea. In fact, they'll be able to chase their own fish if they so choose and are successful. They're able to eat. If they're a candidate for release, then absolutely. But otherwise, it would just be a inhuman care coastal environment for the animals. The next project in the works is for orcas, and that's going to happen, it looks like, in Washington State. So stay tuned for all information in that capacity.
That's me.
But the only thing, and the parameters are, of course, as you can imagine, near impossible to meet. But I believe the equitable change that zoos can do is, if you've got a model of captivity where which animals can quote unquote thrive, then that's good enough. Because if those animals are able to pursue their interests to the fullest, be it interacting with animals or not, breeding or not successfully, being able to roam a natural amount, to be predator, to be prey. I don't know exactly the model because it doesn't quite exist yet, but the animals have to thrive. So that's where I believe zoos are going. I mean, the archaic model of zoos and the way that it is now is just too transparently abusive. I mean, paint on a wall for a giraffe, anyone knows that that's just not good enough. And these zoos are sort of stuck. You don't hear of a lot of new zoos with new facilities. You sort of know of old ones. It's definitely the passing of an old idea. So what becomes of zoos for sure is that of a greater conservation purpose. That animals that can't thrive in captivity have no place to be in captivity, unless, of course, it's rescue rehab, and by virtue of them being circumstantially unavailable for any other option.
Yeah. Because I always want to, my brain wants to create win-win situations whenever possible. You want to create, like, what is there a win for, like, us who want to observe animals in their habitat, and is that well? I wonder about that. But that's the whale sanctuary is something on the east coast of Canada, and you think that's kind of accomplishing that?
Yeah. The whale sanctuary project are involved in both the east coast and west coast eventual operations, but we're at the permit phases now on the east coast. But that is something that's absolutely going to happen.
Yeah, and then there's tons of orcas. It's interesting. Washington State is doing something with orcas because, I mean, the San Juan Islands in Washington State are, like, super notorious. I mean, that's where you go to, like, go whale watching. Boats will take you out and you can go watch the orcas there. I've never seen them personally, but is it something there too? Is that where they're going to be doing something with an orca type of sanctuary?
It is where they're looking. That is a designated site. In fact, Canada just passed and strengthened some legislation that keeps boats and whatnot away from the orcas in Puget Sound. But yeah, absolutely. I had the benefit of seeing wild orcas, and it was in Washington State.
Oh, wow.
It's in the film as well. And I was able to see them from the coast. You can just see them from land. In fact, just yesterday in Vancouver, one young orca was spotted meters from the land. The idea that whales are not something that could be seen by the general public is an old myth that Marineland used to push. They used to say, it's too expensive. You can't see orcas in the wild stuff. But, with the internet and whatnot these days, I mean, you can quite literally spend time in real time with wild orcas, or you can get to Vancouver or, in your case, Washington State. I mean, these days a little less easier, but you can actually get there for the cost of admissions for a full day at SeaWorld. So, if you're looking for a win-win, keep the oceans clean and keep orcas out of pools, and that's our win-win.
Yeah, the Puget Sound is where I certified for my scuba diving certification. It was.
Oh wow, cool. Very cool.
It was really cool. It was so cold, dude. It was my first time.
I was gonna say, first thing I want to say, had to be cold.
You know, you did the certification in a pool, like in a just a rec center's pool is where we were doing it, and then they're like, we're going to Whidbey Island, which is Puget Sound, and I'm just like, it's February, dude. This was when I was a kid too, and it was like, it's and they're like, their justification was, it doesn't matter what month it is. The Puget Sound doesn't change temperature. Like it's always super cold. And they have like a shower waiting for you when you get. There's like a facility on Whidbey Island where they had a shower you could get into. But I remember walking with my wetsuit on from the water to out of the water, because we did it from like a beach, like we just walked right in, right?
Yeah.
And I remember my wetsuit was freezing. Like literally like ice was forming on my wetsuit as I had to get in the shower, get the ice off my wetsuit. You still scuba dive?
I haven't in some time, but it's not something I'm not still familiar with doing. And I look forward to doing things other than swimming in pools, cleaning whale poo. I look forward to that. I did just scuba dive not long ago, a couple of years ago in Mexico. And that was the first time I'd done it recreationally. But yeah, okay. I'm a former enthusiast that's trying to get my passion back because, again, being a commercial diver, cleaning whale poop for 12 years, you lose a little bit of the itch to gear up, but it's coming back.
That was the other thing that the zoo here in Oregon was advertising. They wanted certified scuba divers for like cleaning crap, going in the tanks and cleaning stuff. And I volunteered. I never heard back from them, but you started making a lot of sense to me with the I'm not in the industry. And it makes sense. Like, what if I go there and I go behind the scenes and I see something? Because I would say something.
What if you say?
I would. Yeah. I would. I'd be like, "What the hell is going on over there?" That's it's like you never want to kind of see how the sausage is made. That's kind of you never want to like, you just want to enjoy it, right? And I've been
Everyone likes the packaging. Everyone likes the smile on the packaging. The little pig face, the smile. It's cute. It's warm. It's fuzzy. You give it to your child. You don't think twice. You just don't push play on that video of where it came from. That's for sure.
Yeah. If you ever come out to Washington, man, I will go scuba diving with you in the Puget Sound if you want. So, there's that for you. Uh-oh. He froze. This sucks. I wonder if it's my internet. What was this thing? I don't know what that means. Oh, that's what that means? I thought that was something podcast related. Okay. Okay. There it goes. Drop the podcast. Now it's going to connect. There he is. Boom.
Hey, we're back. I
think it's my computer, dude. I'm sorry. It's not. Don't. It's not you. I think it's my
I'm
end.
not worried.
Anyways, you were invited to Washington State to come scuba dive with me in the Puget Sound. It'll suck, but we.
Dude, that's good to know.
We might see some orcas.
Is a place that I hold that place in my heart, and I do eventually want to get back to the States and make my way to the West a little bit and do a little bit of touring and whatnot. So as soon as the world is more amiable to such things, I definitely intend on being there. So
absolutely,
we'll have to stay in touch.
Last thing, in the documentary, I noticed a black bass guitar. Are you a musician? Is there a musician aspect to your life?
Yes. So
Nice.
I did go to school for audio engineering and whatnot. I did compose much of the music in Marineland's show. I did put it together.
No way.
Otherwise original. Yeah, I did. As my original passion, I played in bands. I've always played in bands. In fact, I was in a band and we did a little tour of Switzerland. Oddly, that was the first time I was ever away from Slushy. It was 10 days. We were away, and I was getting updates daily from trainers on what her condition was like. It was actually quite awful. And that's what actually set the tone for what I knew to be, a problem moving forward, in that I wouldn't be able to leave Marineland without weaning myself off. But and I just recently, we recently started, because the world
Mm-mm. Come back. Is this my Wi-Fi signal? Is that what it is? Dropped it again.
Hey,
There you are, dude.
did you hear the rest of that sentence?
No. Finish that. Again.
Okay, I'll go. So yes, I enjoy a little bit of face melting rock, and of late I've been blessed with actually playing with some of my childhood musician heroes. So I did get connected with Rocky George of Suicidal Tendencies, and the Cro-Mags, and I'm playing with Darren Pfeiffer, who played for Goldfinger,
Wow.
and yeah. So we're getting together and doing all these different remote jam stuff. So we're having fun. Yeah, I'm having. I get. I do everything. I play hockey. I sort of have my hand in a little bit of everything. I've always thought if I'm not going to be great at anything, why not be a little bit good at everything? So.
You know what? I totally relate with that. I'm in a cover band, and we can't play because of COVID, obviously. But we have like 40 songs. We go play a bar, for 3 hours once a month. It's the love of my life, dude. I love it.
Dude.
It's amazing.
For sure. Pays for the drinks for the night. That's it. I noticed the music back there and stuff, the gear. I'm like, okay, I see what's happening.
I have a little sound isolation room where we do our band practice, so it's a lot of fun,
very
man.
Cool,
it's cool.
Man. Very cool.
It's
Much
cool.
respect.
I will kick my bass player out of my band if you make it over here. You can have his spot.
Will do.
I don't even care if he gets mad at me. It's fine.
It's a bass player. We're used to it.
That's right. Hey, so I want to wrap things up, but before I do, we do a secret word on so a lot of my patients listen to my podcast, and we do a secret word that when they email me the secret word, they get $500 in free dental work. So I always like to give the honor of revealing the secret word to my guests. So it can be a word, a phrase, anything, but you can just, invent it, whatever you want to come up with, and that's the word that they'll have to email me to get the 500 big ones. You got a word? Can I put you on the spot?
Yeah. Anthropomorphication.
Right on, dude. Say it again. Help me.
Anthropomorphication. That's when
anthropomorphication.
That's when humans attribute human emotions to animals. So they become anthropomorphic. So let's just go with anthropomorphic. It's a little easier.
Anthropomorphic or anthropomorphication. We'll accept both. As both are be acceptable. Email that to drilledpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll take the fifth person who sends that in to us will be chosen. Remember, if you cannot use this yourself, you can gift this to somebody else, and it's a cool gift. And we get a lot of grateful people coming in with that to get that $500. It makes a big difference for a lot of people. Phil.
Oh, yeah.
This has been so fun. I'm so glad I found you. Your story is an immense inspiration. I feel like I'm doing kind of a similar type of thing. I'm not being sued for $1.5 million yet. It'll come, I'm sure. But it's about making a ripple, making a movement. And man, you're out there, and there's some real positive things. I hope you can dwell on that, man, and dwell on the positive progress that you've made. And from someone looking at your situation from my perspective, there's always probably more to do. I'm sure you think that, there's always more to do, but from my perspective, man, you're winning. You got a lot of people on your side that definitely support you, and you're an inspiration, man. I appreciate that. So, any other plugs? We want people to go watch The Walrus and the Whistleblower. It's an amazing documentary. How else can people find you and find out what you're doing?
I'm Walrus Whisperer on both Instagram and Twitter. You can visit SafeSmooshy.com, and you can send me a little bit of money for my legal bills. Otherwise, check out StealAWalrus.com. You can get some merch. And as of March 5, so currently the Walrus and the Whistleblower is being streamed on multiple places in the U.S. It's a simple Google search. Google search will provide links, but predominantly I think people are using Amazon Prime. But there's been a distribution deal that's been agreed that I only just found out. So as of March 5th, my understanding is it will be streaming on what's known as Discovery Plus.
Okay.
So whatever Discovery Plus is in the U.S., you are going to have Walrus and the Whistleblower available as of March 5. So please watch it, review it, tell a friend.
Great. Awesome. Phil, best of luck to you and all that you do, man. I appreciate linking up with you, and let's stay in touch, okay?
All right, my dude. Thanks.
Hey, everybody, join us next week. Yep, join us next week. Another episode of Drill with Dr. Brady podcast. Thanks so much to Phil Demers, and go check out all his places and help him out. He needs